All right, we'll continue with our morning presentation, moving from vegetables to another pleasant topic, fruits and nut trees. I think you know me by now, but I'll introduce myself. I'm for the record, Paul Summers, and I'm with California State University, Fresno here, the host campus for ADAP. And so for today, as I say, I'm going to be talking about tree crop management. Firstly, my background. You've probably gathered from the discussions we've had so far. I've had a lot of experience overseas, and actually that's one reason why this course was developed, given the situation in Afghanistan. So I've been involved with international agriculture throughout my entire professional career, more than 35 years now. Time really does fly. And I've worked in over 55 countries on short-term assignments and some long-term assignments. So I've had a chance to see our world up close and personal. I have worked in some agricultural conflict zones in the southern Philippines and in Lebanon in the 80s, Somalia, in what's now Somaliland, and in Armenia after the collapse of the USSR, and also some post-conflict areas in Sri Lanka, Armenia, and in Georgia. And I was involved with a poppy substitution project in Burma. Yeah, boy, many moons ago, more than 25 years ago. So very difficult to get people to change crops. I'll say that. That's one thing I learned from that assignment. So again, my core belief, really incremental change with farmers in partnership with farmers is where you're really going to see sustained and genuine progress. And you've heard that theme throughout the week, and it's been, as I say, reinforced by all of our presenters. We always have to keep in mind, who the client is. Most of these folks are resource poor. They don't own their land. They're primarily subsistence growers. There are some commercial growers, but primarily they're very poor people trying to get by day. So any change has to be fit within that kind of parameter, which you can tell they don't have a lot of leeway. So you got to really be able to thread your suggestion or your intervention, and that's a challenge. That's difficult. But hopefully we're giving you some tips on that. Okay, so the session outline today, we're going to be discussing the importance of fruit trees. We're going to be looking at identifying some quality improvement practices. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the commercial side of the fruit trees, because that's probably the area that you're going to interface with your DAIL or your community. They're probably going to ask you about kind of value chain upgrading possibilities. These are suggestions that can be undertaken immediately at no additional cost within one cropping cycle. So again, staying within that theme of tweaking what they already do, just adding value to what they do. And then some ways to work with the DAIL as well to get those messages across. So you have these in your book. Again, some key messages that I'm going to discuss with you: that Afghans planting fruit trees equals stability. Most fruit and nut trees are grown inside the home compound. So again, they're primarily for home consumption, although as peace and order begins to take hold in many parts of Afghanistan, commercial production is starting to take off once again. Fruit trees are multi-purpose, and I'll explain that. And some of the what-to-dos and hows will also be discussed. Okay, so let's get into the main part of the presentation. What do you see going on in this picture? Take a moment to... There's some literal things going on, but there's some subtext or hidden meanings going on in this picture. If it's too bright in here, I know there's a photo in your book, but just to summarize, we've got a young tree sapling being planted.
How many men working
Well, at least remember we talked about how information is transferred in Afghanistan. So you have a village elder working with young folks, probably males, but the interaction of the generations going on there. Okay. What else do you see going on in the picture? If you let's put it this way, you're going out to a community and you see this activity going on. What, from your training, what would this trigger in your mind?
He's teaching them.
One at a time, please.
I said he's teaching them.
Teaching, yes, teaching moment, yeah. But what else? What else do you see going on? What does this mean to you? What would this is a very important indicator for your work.
Stability.
Got it.
Stability.
Those hamburgers worked last night. Yes, stability. Exactly. And why would a mere fruit tree sapling tell you stability?
It's a long-term tree take a number of years to grow rather than short-term crop.
Exactly. Again, you saw my background. When I travel throughout the world and I visit communities, whether they're in a conflict or not, when I see fruit trees being planted, I say, that's a family I want to talk to. Now, why would I want to talk to them? Why wouldn't I want to talk to folks that have mature trees? Why would I want to talk to a family that's planting new fruit trees?
They're thinking long term.
Long term, right, Matt? They have probably, all things considered, in their situation, as we've heard, that they have probably figured out, all things considered, there's probably a chance for peace in our community. Doesn't mean we have to be refugees going forward. So I'm going to take a chance and plant fruit trees, because that means we have decided that we probably have a chance to stay here and see those fruit trees mature. Okay? So I'd certainly make a note in your book on that one as you're going about your work, that the fruit trees really are a really good indicator that, at least in that community or that household, they feel like peace and stability are coming. And as I say, that would probably be a family I'd like to try to get to know more, to understand what are the factors they have looked at in order to determine that, it looks like things are quiet enough here that I'm willing to try and plant fruit trees. Any questions on that? So that's a very good way to use agricultural indicators to get into some of the social, cultural thinking of the people. Okay, so where are fruit trees grown? We've had several folks that have served in Afghanistan. Does this scene look familiar? The high walls, the high mud walls. I see a lot of heads bobbing up and down, so yeah. And that's where they grow, the majority of fruit trees are grown, behind those high walls. Now why would that be? Sir? Theft, yeah. So that means those fruit trees are important, right? Every crop is important to Afghans, but these fruit trees are very important, and so they've got to keep them inside the home compound. It might also be that that's the property that they kind of control on a long-term basis. So we've talked a lot about Afghan families not owning land. They probably have rights to the home compound, right, Naveed? That land they can control. It's wheat or opium or some of the field crops that are, they have a rental agreement with. So again, those fruit trees are an indication that they have rights to that land and they have invested there. Also, another indicator for you folks that actually go inside home compounds, in general, Scott Mann talked about this yesterday with the gardens, but the most valuable plants are usually directly related to the proximity to the kitchen. So you will find, again, your most valuable plants for the family probably right outside the kind of kitchen door or the cookhouse, and that's where, you, as I say, you'll find herbs or spices or flowers or vegetables, and as the farther you get away from the cookhouse, generally, I won't say the lesser the value, but the most important ones are almost directly related to where the cooking is done. And that, again, could be a good icebreaker, especially for if you're on female engagement teams. Just ask them about some of the different herbs and spices and crops they grow around their kitchen area. And as I say, that might be a very good entry point. Now, we also learned, of course, that with more stability, farmers are rehabilitating orchards that were damaged before or planting new ones. And we heard a presentation by Roots of Peace where they have planted, or their communities have planted hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of trees in the last few years. Now, I'll get into, there's a challenge to all of those trees going in, but nevertheless, Afghans are responding, I would say, very, very positively to planting fruit trees. Those numbers are truly impressive. And so there's a major effort to rehabilitate the wonderful fruits and nut crops that Afghanistan is famous for. But again, it's a growing area, but again, the majority is inside the home compound. And again, as Danny said on the first day, Afghan agriculture is not the United States, and a commercial orchard in Afghanistan, it will vary, but in general, a farmer with 30, 35 fruit trees is already considered a commercial farmer in Afghanistan, where here in the U.S., if you have 30 trees, it would probably be like a little home orchard, but for them, that's already considered a pretty good commercial grower. Okay, so how are trees viewed by Afghan society? Like everything in Afghanistan, there's a multi-purpose, a multi-function, a subtext to almost everything that goes on, and fruit trees and nut trees are no different. Okay, so it's important for you all to understand that the trees have a variety of purposes. And we in the West here, we tend to talk about pomegranate. You harvest the fruit, and we eat it. But an Afghan family will probably use a fruit tree, throughout its growing cycle. So it has a purpose. It'll use the fruits for sure, but it may use the leaves at certain times. It may use the branches at other times. It could use the flowers for other things. So you see, they probably optimize all of the parts of the tree throughout the cycle. Did I make that clear? Okay. Where again, we tend to think of it I'm raising pomegranate, and I want to care about getting that fruit at the end of the time. The Afghans will probably optimize the use of that tree throughout the year for a variety of purposes. So again, some trees are considered sacred. As Richard said over here, it represents permanence, a belief in the future. And again, some of the multi-purpose aspects beyond, let's say, direct food consumption, for income generation. And again, that income could be, I'm going to use the word opportunistic. So if the market is flooded, they'll probably keep those fruits back and figure out another way to use them inside the household, or process them in a way and get them on the market later. If there's a chance in the market to sell, they may go ahead and sell those, and with the price premium buy other things. So it's not so cut and dry.
So when you guys are talking about deforestation, it's been a problem in Afghanistan because they're cutting down trees for fuel. Were you talking about like coniferous trees, or?
I would say no, probably more forest species. Naveed, wouldn't you think? To cut a fruit tree is a pretty big issue. So with the deforestation, it's mostly native species. Yeah. No, fruit trees are in a special category. And again, they can be for social events. Again, for those that have been in Afghanistan before, there's a holiday seems like every other week, right? There seems to be some kind of holiday, and then there's village celebrations, there's weddings, funerals, births, graduate, whatever. There's always an excuse to get together, to have a little get together. So it's very important to bring the best products you can. So if you have good pistachios or almonds or walnuts or dried apricot, you want to bring them to the feast because it's social capital for you. It's very important to show that you can provide high quality products for the celebration. So, and you mentioned fuel wood. It could be for livestock feed. There are lots of purposes to these trees. And so again, this is just part of an awareness raising discussion that we're having so that you understand from the Afghan perspective that these trees are not one-dimensional. They're a very, very integral part of what they do. Again, for folks that serve there in the hot season, trees are used for what? Shade. Sometimes they'll put their livestock under the shade. Sometimes they'll play, chess games or chat with tea under the trees. So the trees have a very, very important multi-function and multi-purpose to them. Trees and war, decades of suffering. We've talked primarily about the human dimension of the 3 or 4, intense decades they've been through with violence. The trees have suffered also. They just don't have a human voice, but they have really gone through very, very difficult time. The Soviets, as you know, through forced collectivization, they often destroyed trees. They carpet bombed certain parts of Afghanistan, completely destroying huge orchards. These are just starting to be rehabilitated. So the trees are, like the people, are finally finding their roots again, establishing roots and starting to grow. Also here, as you can see, ISAF forces, trees can be your friend, or trees can also be where the enemy hides. So these are complicated, and I have read reports where commanders have had to make decisions about cutting people's orchards because the bad guys are in there. But again, the Afghans kind of pay a price for that. I realize it's in war, but the trees have had a rough go. I should also mention that really my talk is really more about awareness raising. The technical details, as you know, the eAfghan site is a great reference for getting into the technical details of each and every crop. So given our short period of time here, I'm not going to get into all the different crops that they grow. But these are primarily their main crops that have economic value. This is just kind of a summary of many reports that have been written on the future of the fruit tree industry in Afghanistan. So we've often heard, pomegranates, pistachio, the mulberry tree, apricot, grapes, almonds, plums, and in the east, especially in the Nangarhar area, citrus has a real opportunity. They do plant it there. So again, these are, as I mentioned, you're probably going to be asked on the intervention side more about how you can add value to the crops that they grow. And as I say, I think you have a real challenge because, as Roots of Peace mentioned on day one, the fruit tree planting has been going on for the last, intensively for the last, 4 or 5 years, I would say, where money has really been poured into rehabilitating orchards or planting new ones. So that means there's millions of trees that are about to do what? Bear fruit. So all this effort now is just starting to come to fruition, so to speak. The farmers are going to say, "Uh-oh, lots of fruit out there. Where's the market for this stuff?" So you folks might be, I think you will be, especially if you're heading south. Those orchards are just coming into their commercial yields now, and so there could be some real issues with how to get a good price for these things. So I have a feeling if you deal with economic development issues, there's going to be a ready audience for at least some help or some guidance or door opening by you to find markets, because they're going to have a lot of fruit coming in. So again, tree management skills. These are very important as the supply-demand sharpens, especially the demand and the demand by the buyers. And the buyers are the guys that, of course, reach in their pocket and say, I'll buy that fruit from you, but you got to have the quantity, you have to have the quality that I need, and I need them at a certain time so that I make money. So those require tree management skills. And again, that's, I think, something that you can work with through the Dale or whomever. Not that you're the expert in that, but you can help them map out how do we meet that very real, let's say, challenge that the buyers have put down. That I will buy your product, but I need to have it this, this, and this. To me, that's a very interesting entry point for you to go to work with the Dale and say, how do we meet this demand that the buyers have made? Okay, so tree management skills is not much different than what you've heard all week. Like we saw in the picture at the beginning, it's traditionally passed down by family members. They take great pride in knowing how to farm their land. As we heard, the skills vary according to if they were refugees, which we heard, of course, a lot were. And it's very hard when the knowledge and skills have been broken over 30 years. Because again, it's traditionally passed down from father to son or from mom to daughter, but when you've been in a refugee camp, it really breaks that knowledge of the land, which is so essential. You can't really read it in books. You have to have, probably like the Hawaiians used to say, the mana. You have to have the feeling of the land and how the land works. And you can learn some things in books, but you've got to have a feel for the land, and that's been broken. Okay, farmers as refugees. I say the Taliban have cut trees, and I know that that's very serious in their culture. To cut another man's fruit tree purposely is a very serious offense, and Taliban certainly know that. But they've done it in certain parts of the country for a variety of reasons. And as I mentioned earlier, the Soviets, with their carpet bombing, they destroyed a lot of the trees. So what are some of the major challenges to adding value? These are some of the key features. I'll just touch on these top two: water use and how to conserve the moisture that's in the soil, and the using of pruning tools. Hanny will be covering harvesting and post-harvest in his discussion, so I'll leave that for our next presenter. But these are some of the major challenges to adding value to the product. So what I'm going to do is just take you through a little case study. As I said, I can't cover all of the major fruits. Just to get you to think about your deployment time and the crop cycle, and maybe how you can effectively participate in that crop cycle, given your multitask activities that you're required to do in your work. So I'm going to use pomegranate because it is such an important crop to Afghans. It's been a major thrust of international efforts to get it up and running again. So again, what are some of the multifunctional aspects of pomegranate? Anyone like to? We've discussed some of them, but how important is pomegranate spiritually to Afghans? Anyone know? No? Okay. Well, it is. It's considered part of their Garden of Eden. They believe that the seeds of pomegranate descended from the heavens. So it's mentioned many times in the Quran as a crop that must be in people's gardens. So you can see if they believe that the seeds of pomegranate descended from the heavens, that it's a very, very sacred crop to Afghans, and so it's something that they want to grow, and we always need to accord respect to that. It's also used in cuisine. You can see here, this is a dish, I guess it's maybe a meat dish with kind of a pomegranate, looks like pomegranate sauce with pomegranate seeds. They eat it as a fresh fruit. They use it as a juice. They dry the skins of pomegranate. It can be used for medicinal purposes. They use in their carpets and other clothing. The pomegranate is used as a natural dye. So again, it's got many purposes to it. A very, very important crop. Now, the good thing about pomegranate is, as Alan mentioned, a pomologist, that it's a low input, high output crop. And what this means is that in comparison with other fruit trees, especially like pears or apples or even perhaps apricots that are much more require much more management, really pomegranates don't require very much. They're quite adaptable to difficult conditions. As I listed here, there's at least 48 different varieties grown, including some cold-tolerant Russian varieties. So they grow in a variety of climates. I guess the Kandahari pomegranate is actually very, very highly sought in the market. It's a huge pomegranate. For those that have been in Afghanistan, you've probably seen those. The pomegranate can survive in poor soil fertility, and we've heard about that all week, that we're always trying to help the Afghans to improve the fertility of their soil, but actually pomegranate can grow in rather unfavorable soil fertility. So again, that's why you can see a lot of it in the south, where the soils are a bit weak and they're saline, so they can grow in poor soil, saline soil. They can grow with limited irrigation. They do better with good irrigation, but you'll still get a crop even if there's limited water. And they're fairly pest and disease tolerant, meaning that, again, compared to apples or pears, which have a lot of fungus diseases and insect damage, generally pomegranates are pretty resistant. So for a variety of reasons, it's a very easy to grow crop as compared to others. And it probably fits into the lifestyle of the Afghans as well, because they've got so many other things they're juggling all day long that if they can have a fruit tree that doesn't require a lot of work, that fits well. Okay, so I'm just going to go into I think 4 actions that you can perhaps work with the Dale on if it's a high priority for you to improve the productivity. So you make that product more saleable in the market. And all of these suggestions do not require additional money. This is only tweaking what they do better. So it's kind of a knowledge management thing. They're not going to be asking you for money to do these, because these are things that they can just, as I say, tweak and upgrade what they're already doing. So I'm going to talk about tree management, growth, soil moisture conservation, fruit thinning, and harvesting. So this is actually what a pomegranate looks like if you just let it grow naturally. So what do we have here? It's more of a bush. It's actually a shrub. A pomegranate is not a tree, it's a shrub. We use it here in California as a freeway divider sometimes. So it's a very dense, very active vegetatively and dense shrub. Now, we prune it and shape it because we want to get just a maximum, let's say, quality out of it and get just a few fruits with maximum quality. And you won't do that letting it just grow like this. It just puts out too many leaves. So we shape it up. But this is really what a natural pomegranate plant looks like. Okay, so managing the growth, as we've learned, that the tree is actually fully mature in 6 years, which means it goes into its maximum economic production in 6 years. But the fruits will appear within the first 3 years. So again, with that tree planting effort that's gone on, there's lots of fruits. In fact, here at Fresno State, I'm going to show you this today. We have a new technique for planting pomegranate where we were able to get fruits in 2 years. So there's some real opportunities to bring the maturity date up. Okay, so what do I do first? I usually I start at the ground level and work up. Okay? So what do you see here at ground level? Can you see this picture? If not, I think it's pretty clear in your book there. Pardon me? Yeah, well, we have pruned it into a tree, but it's trying to get back to being a shrub, right? So what these are called are, you got it, sure, suckers. These are called suckers. And these things need to be removed. Anyone know why they would need to be removed?
Well, energy, right?
Yeah, take the energy. Yeah, they take the energy away from the primary crop up here. If they're not pruned back, they will continue to take water and nutrients out, and it'll affect the production of the crop that you want up here. So these are active. You'd say, okay, well, I guess if we do it once, that's fine. But no, throughout the growing season, because it is a shrub, they have to be continually removed. Now, because they have, many farmers have livestock, oftentimes I think the livestock tend to browse on these, so it may not be an issue in your area. However, again, if you're walking with your Dale and you're talking about improving the productivity of the crops and you happen to see a number of farmers with a lot of these shoots coming up, to me that's an outreach moment where you can say that maybe we can hold a little meeting and discuss the removal of these because that affects the growth up on top. Okay, the next thing I look for, and again, this is in the winter time, which I guess you folks are, some of you are going over in the late fall, so this would be actually very, very appropriate, is that the pomegranate is a deciduous tree. It loses its leaves every year, unlike citrus that keep the leaves on evergreen. The pomegranate does lose its leaves, so it looks like just a bunch of sticks, and you folks have seen those in your home gardens and around town. So in the winter time, what we try to do is remove any of the dead branches or cross branching. And here, this tree was a good example in January out at our sister university at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So what we had the students do was remove the cross branches and the dead branches. And the reason you want to remove the cross branching is that trees need a lot of air flow, or you'll get insect and disease buildup. So you want to remove that inside growth and have the growth on the outer edges. Water conservation, we've talked about it all week. Just wanted to introduce the idea of mulching. And mulching is probably the best way to retain the moisture in the soil. We heard earlier from Dig and others about the evaporation that occurs, and this is like putting a blanket on the top of the soil surface. So if they have the organic material and they're not using it, for their fruit trees, this might again be something you can work with the Dale on putting a layer of mulch, as I say here, 3 to 4 inches, and that'll make a big difference if they have limited irrigation. And again, that's just basically using the materials that they have in a way that maybe they haven't used it before. Fruit thinning. We'll be able to do some of this today because it is done in June. And why would we remove why would we need to remove some of the flowers from a tree? Anyone? No?
you get too many in a certain area, you don't want, like a big bulb of them. You want success. You want 30 of them.
Exactly, Mark. Yeah, yeah. If you again, pomegranate being such a, I'm going to call it such an active tree, it throws out a lot of flowers too. Overdoes it. But you're absolutely right. If all of them are allowed to mature, you'll get you'll get tennis ball sized fruits, which are not very marketable. So you gotta help the tree along and manually remove some of the flowers so that you get a good sized fruit. And that's usually done after June, or again, it depends on the year and the climate, but usually done after June, but can be done when it's appropriate, and I'll show you out there today on the farm. So we'll look at this more intensively when we're out there today, but I've got 3 different flowers here. So which one do you think you would keep, and which ones do you think you would remove, based on the idea of saving one for a mature fruit?
I think you saved the one that hasn't bloomed yet.
This one here?
Right.
Okay, how many think you'd keep? That one, or
Like the big red one on the main branch.
this one here?
Yeah, you can support it. It's already proven growth. It's darker, so it's getting more nutrients.
Right. Well,
I'll go with the
okay, and you'd go with the flower?
No, I'll go with the one that's not
That is not opened. Okay. Well, this one, because it's in June, and we harvest here in late September, October, my feeling is that probably this is a little bit late. It may not fully mature. Where this one has already set its fruit in June, so that the chances are of that becoming a full fruit is probably a little bit better than this one and even this one. So those are tough calls, but I would probably say I'd remove these 2 and keep this one, because if you allowed all of them to mature, they'd probably snap the tree, because pomegranates really, when you have a good year, they produce so many fruits and they bend the branches so much that sometimes they snap the whole branch and you lose everything. So we'll look at that a bit more today. But yeah, these are tough calls, and we'll get into barriers to change in a few minutes, but this is going to be a tough one for Afghans. It's not only Afghans, it's in our country too, and other places I've worked. Folks don't usually like to remove any flowers from their trees because they see it as a fruit. So when you try to talk about quality and stuff, I mean, commercial growers get it, but a lot of folks say, but it comes from nature. I think I'd rather have a couple of golf ball size or tennis ball size pomegranates compared to just one big one. So this is an issue that you'll need to work through your Dale on. But if you're looking for a premium price, you usually you do have to thin your flowers out quite a bit. I'm going to skip these because Hanny will be talking about the harvesting aspects. I do have in the book a couple of YouTubes that you could look at. I have the first one is a how to use a harvest bag for pomegranate in the U.S. And I think that's something that is directly transferable to Afghanistan because it's hand labor. We're not using any machinery here in this particular YouTube. It's just showing manually harvesting, but how to use the harvest bag. And as I say, Hanny will talk about that later. And then the second video is an Afghan filmed video, and it shows how they're harvesting pomegranate and without harvest bags. And anyway, you can see the difference. I recall there's a young boy up in the tree, and he's picking them, and he's kind of like baseball, throwing the pomegranate down to his friend, and his friend catches a couple, and then he hits his friend in the head with another one. He missed it, and so there's better ways to harvest because as we're going to learn, you really can't damage the fruits because they will deteriorate pretty quickly. Okay, well, we talked a little bit about income. As we all know, there's a market for everything and a buyer for everything. So these are some of the international standards for pomegranate, and the buyer in your area will determine, you know, what kind he wants, what sizes he wants. So again, if pomegranate is a priority crop for you, and this is something that you know, you're asked to work on, find out from these buyers, you know, what size they need, when they need them, and you know, work towards that. There's been a lot of progress in the last few years. There's an example of putting pomegranate primarily for export, with you know, in a proper box, with some padding for the fruit so they're not damaged. And again, we'll discuss that a little bit more. But most of the folks that, as I say, that you're going to deal with are probably interested in how can I, you know, optimize my income from my fruits.
Is there a particular size or type of pomegranate better for like juicing versus fresh fruit salad?
Well, most of the growers that you're going to deal with, again, the orchards are very small. So they're going to want to maximize the value of each and every fruit, as opposed to here in the valley where you have huge acreage. So I would say there are very few growers that would actually say, I'm raising my pomegranate for juicing, because juicing are usually the culls or the ones that are not saleable as fresh fruit. So again, these guys are so small that so yeah, I guess to answer your question though, probably some of the smaller ones or the probably the immature ones would probably go more for juicing, wouldn't you say, Hanny? Or yeah.
Yeah, it's just that I've heard that, you know, like commonly what happens is they put all the pomegranates in one bag, they put the lesser value ones at the bottom, the best ones at the top, they take them to the market.
Oh yeah.
And the buyer knows what they did, so the buyer's not going to pay for a bag that looks like all the pomegranates on the top. So they're going to get a lower price overall for, instead of separating out high quality pomegranates that they could get a higher price for and low quality pomegranates that they could still sell for juice. Instead, it seems like they're dropping the entire average price by trying to combine them all into one.
And this
grading amount.
this is an excellent point, and again, this is something you can work with, because yeah, it's kind of like everybody knows that this kind of trick is going on, and again, it's not just in Afghanistan. I've seen it everywhere, where they put the best ones in on the top and the worst, but everybody knows that. But again, that's something that you can work with, I think, you know, through your DAOs or key leaders, on that there's value for everybody. So let's not play tricks. Let's just do the grading and sorting. We're going to discuss this so that everybody knows what you have, because it's going to come out in the end anyway that you've been playing around. So it's probably better to do that sorting again at household or community level.
Paul, sorry, just another question in terms of income and markets. Clearly the coalition forces out there at the moment. Just a question, not necessarily for yourself, but others who've been out to Afghanistan. To what degree do we actually, the coalition forces, do they purchase any, do they use any Afghan vegetables or fruit, or it's not just produced on large enough scale? Because it would seem to me that if the scale's there, you know, why would we use locally produced product as opposed to shipping it in?
The coalition force would be part of the market of on the demand side. Okay.
I know the State Department tried they were experimenting with like a local purchase process, but there's security concerns and it's hard to guarantee the safety of the food. So I'm not sure that too much of that is being done actually. Not for fresh things.
Yeah, and we've had.
I expected that to be the case. Yeah, I mean security concerns with the big, you know.
I know we've had vets throughout the last 2 years, and oftentimes their assignment is more on the food safety aspects of keeping your food supply safe. But having said that, I'm going to ask some of the guys that were there in the summertime, because I've heard it from other folks, especially Marines in the South, that they usually just stop the rig if it's safe enough and load up the. There's usually a kid with a pile of pomegranates along the side of the road, and the price is right, and he's. So I remember one Marine group saying that was one of the delights over there, was actually, you know, safety-wise, if it was okay, we just stop the rig and buy the pomegranates and had fresh pomegranate juice when we got back, and made us feel healthy and things. So. But I think it's more kind of on a, not on a strategic level, but kind of on a one-off thing.
you're like on a large base, the chance of you getting out is less than I guess those smaller bases, DSO sites where you're actually removing folks.
Okay, so some suggestions for action. We've been talking about this, and I realize you folks are more in the capacity building side. As I say, for the technical, you can certainly check with the Afghan Ag and the other sources we've provided. So again, just to recap, look at those key activities along the production cycle, like we talked, and discuss with those key players, the buyers, the growers, the assemblers in the village that will get the products together, the input supply dealers. Just find out what are those issues for quality improvement. And again, the wintertime is a great time to do that. It's a great time to say, hey, what worked last year, what didn't work, and how do we get it better this year? And again, everybody wants to make money in that chain, so they'll tell you, I got to have a better product, or that guy didn't pay me the right price, or this kind of thing. I mean, you got to sit through that, but eventually some type of roadmap will evolve out of that discussion, and then you have a chance to help get that thing moving. Again, understand the potential barriers to change. You know, again, many Afghan growers, they really don't like to remove, they don't like to really prune or remove flowers, so that's a big issue. How do you think you might deal with that? What's one way that you can deal with demonstrating a better way of doing things for the families that are saying, I don't know if it's really a good idea to prune or remove flowers and stuff?
By example.
Example, okay. And how might you do an example? How might you do a live example, a real example?
You do have just a few trees.
Yeah,
Part of it.
yeah. What's been suggested in other classes, especially by agribusiness development teams, which have continuity between missions, is they just rent the tree. They just rent a couple of trees from the more kind of innovative farmer and say, well, we'll compensate you for this year if this doesn't work. But let's use your trees as an example. Let's show this, proper pruning, proper thinning. And you can have, this is again a way that the DAO can engage, and you can have a field day and have the farmers look at this and then look at the final, output from the crop. So that's probably doable within your scope. Not that you would be the technical people, but you would be helping set this up. Because again, Afghan farmers, like many, are kind of look and learn people. If they see it working, they don't need to understand the scientific theory behind it. All they have to do is say, okay, I can see that works, and that'll get the ball rolling and hopefully affect change. And again, like always, make sure your actions do not contribute to ongoing community conflict. Always use a do no harm framework. So if the DAO or others are suggesting particular interventions, think about it 5, 6, 7 times. Make sure that, don't say, oh yeah, let's just do that, because it could exacerbate already conflicts in the community. So just always be careful. For every action, there is a reaction. Okay, these are in your book, but again, these are some reach back services online for you. Take a look at them. And finally, advice that will stick. The priority needs to be given to projects that are small, inexpensive, and easy to sustain, and that comes from a agribusiness development team commander. So you've heard that message all week, and I think that's the one you need to keep in mind.